The fluorescent lights in the hospital billing office buzz overhead as I slide my credit card across the desk for the third time this month. My hand trembles slightly as I watch the payment processor spin, calculating another $200 charge that will push my available credit dangerously close to its limit. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. This should cover the anesthesia fees, the billing clerk says with practiced sympathy. Though you'll want to call about the surgical equipment charges that came in yesterday. I nod, trying to look composed while internally calculating how many more payments my financial life can absorb. This wasn't supposed to be my responsibility, but when Mom called crying at midnight 6 weeks ago, there was never really a choice. 3 months earlier, I was living comfortably in my Phoenix townhouse, working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized consulting firm. At 28, I had finally achieved something resembling financial stability. My student loans were manageable, I had $12,000 in savings, and I was even contributing to a 401k. For someone who grew up watching my parents argue about money every single month, this felt like genuine success. Then Mom's gallbladder started acting up. The first emergency room visit in February cost $2,800 after insurance. Mom called me from her car in the hospital parking lot, sobbing into the phone about how she and Dad couldn't afford the follow-up care the doctors were recommending. "Honey, they want me to see a specialist, but our insurance won't cover it until we meet the deductible," she explained between tears. "And your father's been working overtime just to keep up with the mortgage since his hours got cut." I should mention that my parents, Linda and Robert Martinez, have never been good with money. Dad's been a maintenance supervisor at a paper mill in our hometown of Tucson for 20 years, but they've never managed to build any kind of financial cushion. Every month brought a new crisis: car repairs, medical bills, home maintenance issues that consumed whatever small amount they managed to save. Growing up, I was the family problem solver. When Dad's truck broke down, I researched repair options and called mechanics for quotes. When Mom needed help understanding insurance paperwork, I spent hours on the phone with customer service representatives. When they were short on grocery money at the end of the month, I started working part-time at 16 to help contribute. My older brother Tyler had a different approach to family financial crises. He would listen sympathetically, express concern, and then explain why he couldn't help. First, it was college expenses, then entry-level salary limitations, then student loan payments, and eventually graduate school costs. Tyler always had a reasonable excuse, delivered with just enough regret to avoid seeming selfish. Tyler was pursuing his MBA at Arizona State, funded partly by our parents and partly by loans that he'd mentioned several times would be a huge burden for years to come. He lived in a nice apartment near campus, drove a nearly new Honda Civic that Dad had co-signed for, and posted Instagram photos from weekend trips to Sedona and Flagstaff. But when Mom's health crisis escalated, Tyler was conveniently unavailable for the difficult conversations about treatment costs and family financial support. The specialist visit in March revealed that Mom's gallbladder was severely inflamed and would require surgical removal. The procedure itself would cost approximately $4,300 after insurance, not including the various additional fees that medical facilities seem to add, like surprise charges on a restaurant bill. Mom and Dad sat at their kitchen table with medical bills spread across the surface like some kind of administrative nightmare puzzle. Dad's reading glasses were perched on the end of his nose as he squinted at itemized statements that might as well have been written in a foreign language. "We've got about $800 in the savings account," Dad said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd spent decades falling short of financial goals. "And the credit cards are already pretty much maxed from when the water heater went out last year." I remember looking around their modest living room, the same furniture I'd grown up with, the carpet that needed replacing 5 years ago, the television they'd bought secondhand from a neighbor. These weren't people living extravagantly. They were simply trying to survive on an income that never quite stretched far enough. Mom's health was deteriorating while we debated payment options. She was losing weight, couldn't eat normally, and was in constant pain. The doctors made it clear that delaying surgery wasn't medically advisable, but the financial reality was stark. That's when I made the decision that would reshape the next year of my life. "I'll cover it," I said during a family conference call that included Tyler, who was participating via speakerphone from his apartment. "I've got savings and room on my credit cards. Mom needs this surgery now, not after we spend months figuring out payment plans." Tyler's relief was audible through the phone. "That's really generous of you, Lauren," he said. "I wish I could help more, but with grad school and everything." Mom started crying again, but this time from gratitude rather than stress. "Sweetheart, I can't ask you to do that. It's so much money." "You're not asking," I replied firmly. "I'm offering. Family takes care of family." That phrase would later haunt me in ways I couldn't imagine at the time. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. I took 3 days off work to drive down to Tucson and help coordinate Mom's care. Tyler had midterm exams and couldn't make it, but he sent a flower arrangement to the hospital with a card expressing his love and support. I handled the pre-admission paperwork, spoke with the surgical coordinator about post-operative care requirements, and made sure Dad understood the medication schedule Mom would need to follow during recovery. I also paid the hospital's required deposit, charged $2,150 to my personal credit card. The surgery went smoothly, and Mom's recovery was faster than expected. Within a week, she was feeling dramatically better than she had in months. The constant pain was gone. She could eat normally again, and her energy levels returned to something approaching normal. "I feel like myself again," she told me during a phone call 2 weeks after the procedure. "I can't thank you enough for making this possible." Dad echoed her gratitude whenever we spoke. "You saved your mother's life, honey," he said with genuine emotion. "We won't forget what you did for us." The total cost ended up being $4,347 after insurance adjustments and various facility fees. I charged most of it across 3 different credit cards to manage the immediate impact on my finances, but the reality was that I'd just committed to paying approximately $200 per month in additional minimum payments for the foreseeable future. My emergency fund was completely depleted, and my carefully planned budget was thrown into chaos. I started eating lunch at my desk instead of going out with coworkers, canceled my gym membership, and postponed a planned vacation to San Diego that I'd been looking forward to for months. But Mom was healthy, and that felt like the most important thing. Tyler called me a few days after the surgery to express his appreciation for what I'd done. "You're amazing for stepping up like that," he said. "I know Mom and Dad are so grateful." "I'm just glad she's okay," I replied. "It's what anyone would do." Looking back, I realized that conversation was the first warning sign. Tyler expressed gratitude for my sacrifice, but there was an undertone of assumption, as if my willingness to help financially was simply my designated role in the family dynamic. At the time, though, I felt good about my decision. I'd solved a crisis, helped my parents when they needed it most, and maintained the family relationships that mattered to me. The financial strain was manageable, and I assumed things would return to normal once the immediate crisis had passed. I had no idea that Mom was already planning how to recognize Tyler's sacrifices during this difficult time, or that my financial contribution would soon be reframed as simply what was expected of me rather than what I chose to give. The first hint of what was coming arrived exactly 5 weeks after Mom's surgery, in the form of a casual comment during our weekly family phone call. "Tyler's been so stressed about his thesis defense," Mom mentioned while updating me on family news. "I've been thinking about how to help him celebrate when he finishes his MBA program. Maybe a nice graduation gift to show him how proud we are." "That sounds nice," I replied, genuinely happy that Tyler was progressing through his graduate program. "What kind of gift are you thinking about?" Well, he's been looking at cars, Mom said. His Honda has some transmission issues, and he'll need something reliable for job interviews after graduation. I was thinking we could help with a down payment. I felt a small knot of concern in my stomach, but tried to stay positive. That's thoughtful of you. Do you and Dad have room in the budget for something like that? Mom's pause was just long enough to make me uncomfortable. We were hoping you might want to contribute, she said finally. After all, Tyler's education benefits the whole family, and you've always been so good at managing money. The conversation about Tyler's graduation gift should have been my first red flag, but I was still operating under the assumption that family dynamics would eventually balance out fairly. I agreed to think about contributing to Tyler's car fund, though something about Mom's tone made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't quite articulate. 2 days later, Tyler called me directly for the first time since Mom's surgery. His timing felt calculated, casual enough to seem spontaneous, but pointed enough to feel like a coordinated effort. "Hey, Lauren, I heard Mom mentioned the car situation to you," he said, his voice carrying that particular blend of gratitude and expectation that I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "I really appreciate you even considering helping out." "What's wrong with your current car?" I asked, genuinely curious about the urgency of this new expense. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. Tyler launched into a detailed explanation of transmission problems, repair costs that might exceed the car's value, and the importance of having reliable transportation for upcoming job interviews. The way he described it, this wasn't a want. It was a legitimate need that required immediate attention. "I've been looking at certified pre-owned vehicles in the $18,000 to $22,000 range," he continued. "Nothing fancy, just something dependable that will last through the next few years while I get established in my career." The numbers hit me like cold water. Even a modest contribution to a $20,000 car purchase would likely mean another $2,000 to $3,000 on my already strained credit cards. I was still making minimum payments on Mom's medical bills, had canceled my own car maintenance to save money, and was eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch most days. "Tyler, I want to help, but I'm still recovering financially from Mom's surgery," I said carefully. "Maybe we could look at less expensive options, or wait a few months until I'm back on solid ground?" There was a pause that lasted just long enough to feel awkward. "Of course," Tyler said finally, but his tone had shifted slightly. "I understand you're dealing with the medical stuff, though I have to say, Mom's been telling everyone how generous you were with that. It really meant a lot to the family," the way he phrased it, generous and meant a lot to the family, made my contribution sound like a charitable donation rather than a necessary intervention to save our mother's health. But I pushed down my irritation and focused on finding a solution that might work for everyone. "What if we looked for something in the $12,000 range?" I suggested. "I might be able to help with a smaller down payment, and you could finance the rest." Tyler's enthusiasm dimmed noticeably. I guess that could work. But Mom was really excited about being able to help me get something nice for graduation. She mentioned that since you handled the surgery costs, she and Dad could focus their savings on this. The implication was clear. My financial sacrifice for Mom's health had freed up family resources that would now flow toward Tyler's benefit. What I had framed as an emergency medical intervention was being recast as my contribution to a family financial strategy that I hadn't agreed to participate in. Over the next 2 weeks, the car situation dominated family conversations. Mom would bring it up during our weekly phone calls, Dad would mention Tyler's transportation concerns when we spoke, and Tyler himself would text me links to vehicles he was considering with notes like, "thoughts," and "this one seems reasonable." The pressure was subtle but persistent. Nobody directly asked me to commit to a specific amount, but the assumption that I would contribute something seemed to be solidifying into fact without my explicit agreement. Meanwhile, my own financial situation was deteriorating in ways that I hadn't fully communicated to my family. The medical bills had triggered a cascade of financial adjustments that affected every aspect of my daily life. My credit card minimum payments had increased to $340 per month, eating up money that previously went toward groceries and gas. I'd switched to generic brands at the supermarket, started clipping coupons for the first time since college, and began walking to work twice a week to save on gas money. The psychological impact was harder to quantify, but equally real. I found myself calculating the cost of every small purchase: coffee, lunch out with coworkers, a magazine at the checkout line. The financial cushion that had taken me years to build was gone, replaced by a constant awareness of my proximity to real financial trouble. But the most frustrating aspect was the isolation I felt from my own family during this period of financial stress. While I was adjusting my lifestyle to accommodate the debt I'd taken on for Mom's surgery, family conversations centered on Tyler's needs and how to meet them. During one particularly difficult week in April, I discovered that my car needed $800 worth of brake work. The repair was essential for safety, but coming up with the money meant charging it to the same credit card I'd used for Mom's medical expenses. I mentioned the car repair during a family call, hoping for some acknowledgement of my own financial challenges. Instead, Dad immediately connected it to Tyler's situation. "See, that's exactly why Tyler needs a more reliable vehicle," Dad said. "These older cars just drain your budget with constant repairs," Mom agreed enthusiastically. "Maybe you two could go car shopping together and get some kind of family discount." The suggestion that I help Tyler buy a newer car while I was struggling to maintain my own vehicle felt almost surreal. I was operating on the assumption that my financial contributions were temporary sacrifices during a family emergency, while they seemed to view them as evidence of my capacity to contribute indefinitely. The breaking point came during Tyler's graduation week in May. The family gathered in Tucson for his MBA completion ceremony, and the conversation inevitably turned to celebration plans and future support. Tyler had received 2 job offers, one in Denver paying $75,000 annually, and another in Portland starting at $68,000. Both represented significant improvements over his current situation, and both would require relocation expenses and professional wardrobe investments. "This is such an exciting time," Mom said over dinner at a restaurant that I noticed was significantly more expensive than places we'd typically chosen for family celebrations. "Our son is going to be a success." Tyler glowed under the attention, describing his career prospects and the lifestyle changes he anticipated. He'd already started researching apartments in both cities, looking at places that cost more per month than I spent on my mortgage. "Of course, getting established is going to be expensive," Tyler mentioned casually. "Security deposits, moving, costs, professional clothes, networking events. It's an investment in the future." Dad nodded approvingly. "That's the kind of thinking that leads to real success. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money." I found myself wondering who "you" was in that equation, and where the money for Tyler's investments was expected to come from. After dinner, Mom pulled me aside for what she described as a sister-to-sister conversation about family financial planning. "Lauren, honey, I know you've already done so much with the medical bills," she began, "but Tyler's at such a crucial point in his life. The next 6 months could determine his entire career trajectory." She had clearly rehearsed this conversation, hitting points about family investment, long-term thinking, and the importance of supporting education and career development. "We're not asking for anything unreasonable," Mom continued. "Just maybe help with the car down payment and some of the moving expenses. Think of it as an investment in Tyler's future that will benefit the whole family." The phrase investment in Tyler's future was particularly galling, given that my investment in Mom's health had been reframed as simply meeting family obligations rather than going above and beyond my fair share. "Mom, I'm still paying off credit card debt from your surgery," I said directly. "I can't take on more expenses right now without seriously damaging my own financial stability." Mom's expression shifted to something between disappointment and surprise, as if my financial limitations were an unexpected obstacle rather than a predictable consequence of my previous sacrifices. "I thought you were doing well financially," she said. "You always seem so put together and responsible." That phrase, responsible, captured the impossible situation I'd found myself in. My financial responsibility had become the reason why my family expected me to shoulder financial burdens, but acknowledging the costs of that responsibility was somehow unreasonable or unexpected. Tyler joined our conversation, having apparently been briefed on Mom's approach. "I really don't want to put pressure on anyone," he said with practiced consideration. "But I also don't want to miss opportunities because of short-term financial constraints. Maybe we could work out some kind of payment plan?" The suggestion of a payment plan made the car purchase sound like a family business transaction, with me serving as Tyler's personal financing option. The fact that I was already making payments on debt incurred for family medical expenses didn't seem to factor into his calculations. That night, lying in my childhood bed in my parents' house, I tried to calculate whether I could actually afford to help Tyler without destroying my own financial recovery. The math was unforgiving. Between existing credit card payments, my mortgage, basic living expenses, and the ongoing costs of maintaining my own car and health insurance, I had maybe $150 per month in discretionary income. Helping Tyler with a car down payment would require either depleting what remained of my available credit or finding ways to cut my expenses even further. Neither option seemed sustainable or fair, but rejecting my family's request felt equally impossible. Tyler was graduating with an advanced degree, entering a promising career, and asking for help at what was genuinely a pivotal moment in his life. Mom and Dad had always sacrificed for their children's education and opportunities. The problem was that family sacrifice seemed to have become synonymous with Lauren's financial sacrifice, while Tyler's contributions remained theoretical and future-oriented. I made a decision that I would later regret deeply. Instead of setting clear financial boundaries, I agreed to contribute $1,800 toward Tyler's car purchase, money that I would charge to my credit card and pay off over the following 8 months. The family's relief was immediate and heartfelt. Mom hugged me with tears in her eyes. Dad patted my shoulder with genuine pride, and Tyler expressed gratitude that seemed sincere and appropriately overwhelmed. "You're incredible," Tyler said. "I promise I'll pay this forward once I get established in my career." At the time, his promise felt meaningful and genuine. I believed that family financial support was reciprocal, that my willingness to help during their times of need would be remembered and returned when I faced my own challenges. I had no idea that within 6 months, my family would have completely reframed my contributions as evidence of my capability to give more, rather than recognition of what I had already given. Tyler's car purchase celebration lasted exactly 1 weekend. By the following Monday, he was texting me photos of professional suits with price tags that made my stomach drop. The job in Denver had come through with a start date in early July, and apparently my contribution to his transportation needs had established me as his go-to financial advisor for career-related expenses. "Lauren, check this out," his text read, accompanied by a photo of a navy blue suit with a $480 price tag. The HR manager mentioned that first impressions are crucial in consulting. "I want to make sure I'm investing in quality pieces that will last." The word investing had become Tyler's favorite justification for expensive purchases. Everything was an investment. The $220 dress shoes, the $95 leather portfolio, the $340 professional shirts that required dry cleaning. His new vocabulary of career success had a price tag attached to every item. I stared at my phone screen while eating my standard lunch of peanut butter crackers and a banana, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't sound unsupportive while also not encouraging further financial requests. "Those look professional," I texted back neutrally. "Have you budgeted for the wardrobe costs?" His response came immediately. Still working on that. The relocation expenses are adding up faster than I expected. But Mom mentioned you might have some insight into managing these kinds of career investments. Mom mentioned. Those two words were becoming a recurring theme in conversations with Tyler, suggesting that my role as family financial consultant was being discussed and planned in conversations I wasn't part of. I called Mom that evening, hoping to clarify what exactly she had been telling Tyler about my willingness to provide ongoing financial support. "Oh, honey, I just mentioned that you're so good with budgeting and financial planning," Mom said when I brought up Tyler's wardrobe situation. "He's feeling overwhelmed by all the startup costs for his new job." "Mom, I helped with the car down payment, but I can't fund his entire career transition," I said as gently as possible. "I'm still paying off the medical bills and the car contribution." There was a pause that felt loaded with disappointment. "Of course, dear," Mom said finally. "Nobody expects you to pay for everything. Though Tyler did mention that the suit expenses are really just a one-time investment in his professional future." The phrase one-time investment would become laughable. Within weeks, as Tyler's financial needs seemed to multiply with each step of his career transition. The Denver job required him to start work on July 15th, which meant apartment hunting, security deposits, moving truck rentals, and utility connections. Tyler approached each expense as a separate crisis requiring family consultation and support. His apartment search focused on places that cost $1,650 per month, which he justified as necessary for networking and professional image. When I suggested looking at more affordable options, Tyler explained that his HR manager had specifically mentioned the importance of living in certain neighborhoods for career advancement. "It's not about luxury," Tyler said during a family conference call in June. "It's about positioning myself for success. The wrong address could actually hurt my career prospects." Dad supported Tyler's logic enthusiastically. "That's smart thinking. Son, you can't put a price on career opportunities." I found myself wondering why Dad's wisdom about career investments didn't extend to supporting my ongoing financial stability, or acknowledging the career opportunities I might be missing while servicing debt I'd accumulated for family expenses. The apartment Tyler eventually chose required the first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit totaling $4,150. He had saved approximately $1,200 toward moving expenses, leaving a gap of nearly $4,000 that became the focus of increasingly urgent family discussions. "We're so close to getting Tyler launched successfully," Mom said during one of our phone calls. "It would be terrible if he had to settle for a less suitable apartment just because of a short-term cash flow issue." The framing of Tyler's financial shortfall as a short-term cash flow issue rather than a fundamental budgeting problem became typical of how family conversations addressed his needs versus mine. When I had struggled to pay for Mom's medical expenses, it was described as me being generous and stepping up for my family. When Tyler needed money for apartment deposits, it was presented as a temporary technical problem requiring family solution finding. The pressure to contribute to Tyler's apartment costs was more sophisticated than previous requests. Instead of directly asking for money, family conversations focused on problem-solving sessions where my financial capacity was assumed as one of the available resources. "Maybe we could all contribute proportionally to what we're able to manage," Dad suggested during a particularly tense family meeting. "Tyler's getting established. Mom and I have limited savings, but Lauren's situation is more stable." My situation, being characterized as more stable, felt surreal, given that I was carrying $6,800 in credit card debt, had depleted my emergency fund, and was living paycheck to paycheck for the first time in years. But pointing out my financial limitations felt like being unsupportive of Tyler's career advancement. While everyone else's limitations were treated as fixed constraints that required creative solutions, I ended up contributing $1,500 toward Tyler's apartment deposits, charged to a credit card that was already carrying a balance from his car down payment. The family's gratitude was immediate and effusive. But I noticed that Tyler's thank you focused more on timing and logistics than on the personal sacrifice involved. "This is perfect timing," Tyler said. "I can get the apartment locked down and focus on preparing for the job instead of worrying about housing." The assumption that my financial contribution had eliminated his worries while creating new ones for me seemed to escape everyone's attention. Tyler's move to Denver was scheduled for the second week of July, requiring a rental truck, professional, movers for heavy items, and travel expenses for the 600-mile drive from Tucson. These costs, predictably, exceeded his budget by several $100s. "The moving truck rental is more expensive than I expected," Tyler reported during a family call 3 days before his departure date. "And the professional movers want $400 just to handle the furniture loading." Mom immediately began brainstorming solutions. What if Lauren drove down to help with the move? She could follow the truck in her car and help with unpacking on the other end. The suggestion that I use my vacation days and gas money to provide free labor for Tyler's move felt like the natural extension of my established role as family problem solver, but it also represented a new level of expectation about my availability and resources. "I'd love to help," I said carefully, "but I can't take time off work right now. I'm still catching up from the days I took for Mom's surgery recovery." Tyler's disappointment was audible. "I was really hoping to have family support during the move. It's such a big transition." Mom's tone shifted slightly. "Lauren, honey, this is Tyler's big moment. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family milestones." The irony of being lectured about family sacrifices while still paying off debt from my previous family sacrifices was almost overwhelming. But I recognized that pointing this out would make me seem petty and unsupportive. I ended up taking 2 unpaid days off work and driving to Denver to help with Tyler's move, a decision that cost me approximately $400 in lost wages and travel expenses. Tyler's new apartment was beautiful: hardwood floors, granite countertops, a balcony overlooking downtown Denver. The monthly rent exceeded my mortgage payment by $200, but Tyler was thrilled with the professional image it projected. "This is exactly what I needed," Tyler said as we unpacked boxes in his spacious living room. "I can already picture networking, events, and dinner parties here." I was happy for Tyler's success and excited about his career prospects, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his achievements were being funded partially by my financial sacrifices in ways that weren't being acknowledged or balanced. During the drive home to Phoenix, I calculated my total family-related expenses over the previous 5 months. $4,340 for Mom's surgery, $1,400 for Tyler's car down payment, $1,500 for his apartment deposits, $400 for moving assistance, and various smaller contributions that totaled approximately $350. I had spent $397 on family support since February, money that represented my entire emergency fund plus significant credit card debt that would take months to repay. Meanwhile, Tyler was starting his new job with a beautiful apartment, a reliable car, and a professional wardrobe that positioned him for career success. His financial foundation had been supported by family contributions, while mine had been depleted to provide that support. The most troubling aspect wasn't the money itself, but the emerging pattern of how family financial dynamics were being framed and justified. My contributions were described as generous gifts that demonstrated my love and commitment to family success. Tyler's needs were presented as temporary challenges requiring family problem-solving. Mom and Dad's limitations were treated as fixed constraints that required creative workarounds. Nobody seemed to be tracking the cumulative impact on my financial stability, or considering whether the pattern of family support was sustainable or fair. 2 weeks after Tyler started his job in Denver, Mom called with news that initially sounded like good family updates. "Tyler loves his new position," she reported happily. "His supervisor already mentioned potential promotion opportunities, and he's been invited to join a professional networking group." "That's wonderful," I said. genuinely pleased that Tyler's career transition was going smoothly. The networking group has monthly dinner meetings at nice restaurants, Mom continued. Tyler mentioned that the membership fee is $200, plus the dinner costs each month. It sounds like exactly the kind of professional development that will accelerate his career. I felt a familiar sinking sensation as I recognized where this conversation was heading. He's wondering if it makes sense to invest in the networking membership now, while he's getting established, or wait until his first performance review, Mom said with studied casualness. The word invest again, and the implication that Tyler's networking expenses might require family financial consultation and support. Mom, I said firmly, Tyler's making $75,000 a year now. He should be able to handle his own professional development expenses. Mom's silence lasted long enough to feel uncomfortable. Of course, honey, she said finally. It's just that he's still getting established, and opportunities like this don't come along often. The conversation ended politely, but I could tell that Mom was disappointed by my lack of enthusiasm for supporting Tyler's networking investments. That night, I received a text from Tyler that confirmed my growing suspicions about how financial dynamics were being discussed in conversations that didn't include me. Hey Lauren, Mom mentioned you might have concerns about the networking group costs. I totally understand your perspective. Maybe we could talk through the long-term career benefits when you have time. The fact that Tyler knew about my concerns before I had expressed them directly to him suggested that my role as family financial advisor was being discussed and planned without my participation. More troubling was Tyler's assumption that my objection was based on not understanding the long-term career benefits, rather than on my own financial limitations and the unfair distribution of family financial burdens. I was beginning to realize that my family had fundamentally reinterpreted my financial contributions as evidence of my capacity and willingness to provide ongoing support, rather than as significant personal sacrifices that deserved acknowledgement and reciprocity. The pattern was becoming clear. Every time I helped with a family financial crisis, the threshold for what constituted reasonable requests for future support shifted higher, while my own financial challenges became less visible and less worthy of family concern. Tyler was building his career foundation with family financial assistance, while I was building debt to provide that assistance. But somehow, in family conversations, his success was treated as independent achievement, while my support was treated as expected family contribution. I started to wonder if there was any level of financial sacrifice that would satisfy my family's expectations, or if my willingness to help had trapped me in a role that would expand indefinitely to meet whatever needs arose. The answer would come sooner than I expected, in the form of a conversation that would finally make me understand how little my family valued my financial well-being compared to Tyler's continued success. The call that shattered my understanding of my family's priorities came on a Tuesday evening in late August. I was sitting at my kitchen table reviewing my credit card statements and trying to figure out how to accelerate my debt repayment, when Mom's ringtone interrupted my calculations. Lauren, honey, I have the most wonderful news, Mom said, her voice bubbling with excitement. Tyler got promoted already. Can you believe it? Not even 2 months on the job, and they're moving him to senior consultant. I felt genuinely happy for Tyler's success. Despite my growing frustration with family financial dynamics, I wanted my brother to thrive in his career. That's incredible, I said. He must be doing amazing work to get recognized so quickly. Oh, he is, Mom gushed. His supervisor told him he's never seen a new hire adapt so quickly. And the promotion comes with a $12,000 salary increase, plus eligibility for performance bonuses. Tyler's rapid success should have been purely good news, but something in Mom's tone suggested there was more to this conversation than simple celebration. The thing is, Mom continued, the promotion requires some additional professional development. Tyler needs to get certified in some specialized consulting methodologies, And there's a big industry conference in Chicago next month that could really accelerate his networking. My stomach tightened as I recognized the familiar pattern of Tyler's success creating new financial needs that somehow became family concerns. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, though I wasn't sure why I was using "we" to describe Tyler's professional expenses. "Well, the certification program is $2,400, and the Chicago conference is about $1,800 including travel and lodging," Mom said. It sounds like a lot, but Tyler's supervisor specifically recommended both opportunities. I did quick math in my head. Tyler's salary increase meant he was now making approximately $87,000 per year, which should have been more than sufficient to cover $4,200 in professional development expenses. "Mom, Tyler's making really good money now," I said carefully. "Why, can't he cover these costs himself?" Mom's pause felt loaded with disappointment and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Lauren, honey, you sound a little resentful," she said finally. "Tyler's still getting established, and these opportunities could determine his entire career trajectory. I thought you'd be excited about his success." The suggestion that questioning Tyler's ongoing need for financial support somehow meant I wasn't supportive of his success felt manipulative, but I tried to stay focused on the practical issues. "I am excited for Tyler," I replied. "But I'm still paying off debt from all the family expenses earlier this year. I can't keep contributing to Tyler's career investments." "Of course you can't pay for everything," Mom said, her tone shifting to something that sounded like a patient explanation. "But Tyler was hoping the family could help with maybe half the costs, just until he gets his first performance bonus." The assumption that the family meant Lauren had become so normalized that Mom didn't even attempt to disguise it anymore. Dad was never mentioned as a potential contributor to these family financial strategies, and Mom's contributions were always described in terms of emotional support rather than financial resources. "I can't do it," I said firmly. "I'm carrying too much debt already." Mom's silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. "I'm disappointed, Lauren," she said finally. "I thought family meant more to you than money concerns." The accusation hit like a physical blow. After months of depleting my savings and accumulating debt to support family members, being accused of prioritizing money over family felt profoundly unfair. But before I could respond, Mom delivered the statement that would change everything. "Your brother deserves a bigger gift than what you've given him so far." The words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. Tyler deserved a bigger gift. Not Tyler needed help, or Tyler had asked for support, but Tyler deserved more than what I had already provided. "What have I given him?" I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Mom, I've spent over $8,000 on family expenses this year. I paid for your surgery, Tyler's car, his apartment, his moving costs." "And we're grateful for all of that," Mom replied. But her tone suggested that gratitude had an expiration date. "But Tyler's at such a crucial point in his career. This could be the difference between ordinary success and extraordinary achievement." I realized that Mom had completely reframed my financial contributions from significant personal sacrifices into baseline family participation that created obligations for future giving. "I can't afford to give Tyler a bigger gift," I said, emphasizing her words. "I can barely afford the gifts I've already given him." "Lauren, honey, you're being dramatic," Mom said, her voice taking on that condescending tone she'd used when I was a teenager complaining about unfair treatment. "You have a stable job and no major expenses like Tyler's career development or your father's medical issues. No major expenses except the debt I'd accumulated supporting their major expenses, but pointing that out would apparently make me petty and unsupportive." The conversation ended awkwardly, with Mom expressing disappointment in my attitude and me feeling like I'd been accused of selfishness for having financial limitations. But the real betrayal was still coming. 3 days later, I received a group text message that included Mom, Dad, and Tyler. The message was from Dad, which was unusual, since he typically avoided family group communications. Family meeting Sunday at 2 p.m., important financial discussion. Please confirm attendance. I confirmed, assuming this would be a conversation about realistic family budgeting and sustainable approaches to supporting Tyler's career development. Instead, it was an intervention designed to pressure me into providing what Mom had described as Tyler's bigger gift. The meeting took place in my parents' living room, with everyone sitting in the same seats we'd occupied during countless childhood family discussions. But the dynamic felt different, more formal and confrontational than our typical family gatherings. Dad started with what sounded like a prepared statement. "Lauren, we've called this meeting because we're concerned about your reluctance to support Tyler during this crucial period in his career," he said, consulting notes he'd written on a legal pad. My reluctance to support Tyler, not my ongoing financial contributions, not my debt accumulation, not my sacrifices, but my reluctance to do more. "We understand that you've made some contributions this year," Dad continued, "but Tyler's opportunities right now could benefit the entire family for decades to come." Mom jumped in with supporting arguments. "Lauren, honey, you've always been so responsible with money. We know you can afford to help Tyler with these career investments." Tyler sat quietly, letting our parents make his case, but I could tell he was comfortable with this approach to securing financial support. "I've been thinking about this a lot," Tyler said when it was his turn to speak, "and I realize that my career success will eventually allow me to help the family in ways I can't right now. But I need support during this establishment phase." The presentation felt rehearsed and coordinated, as if they'd spent considerable time preparing arguments designed to overcome my financial objections. Then, Dad delivered information that revealed how long they'd been planning this conversation without, including me in their discussions. "We've looked into Lauren's financial situation," Dad said, referring again to his notes. "And based on her salary and housing costs, she should have approximately $800 per month in discretionary income." I stared at him, trying to process the implications of what he'd just said. "You've looked into my financial situation?" I asked. "Just basic math," Mom said dismissively. "We know what marketing coordinators make in Phoenix, and we know your mortgage payment from when you bought the house. It's not hard to calculate. Their basic math didn't account for credit card payments, increased insurance costs, car maintenance, student loan payments, or any of the other expenses that had consumed what they calculated as my discretionary income. But more fundamentally, the fact that my parents had been discussing and analyzing my finances without my knowledge felt like a profound violation of boundaries. "You had no right to speculate about my financial situation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And your calculations don't include the debt I've accumulated helping with family expenses." Dad waved away my objection with the same gesture he'd used to dismiss my complaints as a child. "Credit card debt is manageable if you budget properly," he said. "The important thing is supporting Tyler while he has these opportunities." Tyler finally spoke up, but not to defend my financial privacy or acknowledge my previous sacrifices. "Lauren, I know you're concerned about money, but this certification and conference could literally change my entire career trajectory," he said. "I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for an investment in family success." The word investment, again, with its implication that my financial contributions would somehow generate returns for me rather than simply depleting my resources for Tyler's benefit. But then, Mom revealed the depth of their planning and the extent to which they'd discussed my role without including me. "We've already talked to Tyler's supervisor," Mom said proudly. She confirmed that employees who get certified and attend these conferences typically see significant career advancement within 6 months. They'd been in contact with Tyler's workplace, gathering information to support their case for why I should fund his professional development. "You talked to Tyler's supervisor about family finances?" I asked, incredulous. "Just about the career benefits," Tyler said quickly. "I mentioned that my family was considering investing in my professional development, and she was very encouraging about the potential returns. My family was considering investing. Not Tyler was planning to invest in himself, not the family was hoping to support Tyler, but my family was considering investing, with the clear implication that my financial contribution was the family investment. They were discussing. The meeting continued for another hour, with various arguments about family loyalty, long-term thinking, investment strategies, and the importance of supporting education and career development. Every objection I raised was met with counter-arguments that reframed my concerns as short-sighted or selfish. My debt was manageable. My financial limitations were temporary. My reluctance to contribute more was disappointing. But the most devastating revelation came at the end of the meeting, when Dad revealed information that showed how completely they'd misunderstood or ignored the financial sacrifices I'd already made. "Lauren, we appreciate what you've done this year," Dad said in what sounded like a concluding statement. "But we need you to understand that Tyler's career development is more important than your personal financial comfort. More important than my personal financial comfort. Not more important than luxuries or discretionary spending, but more important than my financial stability and well-being." That phrase revealed that my family had fundamentally categorized my financial concerns as matters of personal comfort rather than legitimate economic constraints, while Tyler's career expenses were treated as family necessities requiring collective support. "I can't do this anymore," I said, standing up from the couch where I'd been sitting for over an hour. "I've given everything I can afford to give, and it's never enough." "Lauren, don't be dramatic," Mom said. "We're just asking you to think about what's best for the family's long-term success." But I finally understood that the family's long-term success had become synonymous with Tyler's career advancement, while my financial well-being had been relegated to a secondary concern that shouldn't interfere with more important family priorities. I left that meeting knowing that my role in family financial dynamics had been fundamentally redefined without my consent or participation. I was no longer a family member whose needs and limitations deserved consideration. I was a financial resource whose capacity should be maximized for Tyler's benefit. The next morning, I received a text from Tyler that confirmed everything I'd begun to suspect about how my family viewed my financial contributions. "Hey Lauren, thanks for considering the certification costs. I know it's a big ask, but I promise this investment will pay off for all of us. Once I'm established, I'll be able to help the family in ways I can't right now." Tyler's message revealed that despite my explicit refusal to contribute more money, he was operating under the assumption that I would eventually agree to fund his professional development. More troubling was his promise to help the family once he was established, which implied that my current help was creating obligations for future reciprocity that Tyler would define and control. I was trapped in a family dynamic where my financial contributions were treated as baseline expectations. My limitations were dismissed as temporary inconveniences, and my well-being was subordinated to Tyler's career advancement. But I was about to discover that the financial pressure was just the beginning of a much deeper betrayal that would force me to completely reconsider my understanding of family loyalty and self-respect. The breaking point came exactly 1 week after the family intervention, when I discovered how my parents had been describing my financial situation to other people in their social circle. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who had known our family for 15 years, stopped me while I was checking my mail and made a comment that initially seemed like casual conversation but revealed something much more troubling. "Your mother mentioned that you're doing so well financially that you're able to support Tyler's career development," Mrs. Henderson said with genuine admiration. "It's wonderful when siblings can help each other achieve their dreams." I stood, frozen at my mailbox, trying to process what Mrs. Henderson had just revealed. My parents weren't just discussing my financial situation in private family conversations. They were sharing their interpretation of my resources and generosity with neighbors and friends. "What exactly did my mother tell you?" I asked carefully. Mrs. Henderson looked slightly uncomfortable, as if she sensed she might have stepped into family territory she didn't fully understand. "Just that you've been so generous with helping pay for medical expenses and Tyler's career transition," she said. She mentioned how proud she is that her daughter is in a position to support family members who are still getting established. The phrase "in a position to support" suggested that Mom had been portraying my financial contributions as evidence of my prosperity and stability, rather than as significant personal sacrifices that had created real hardship for me. That evening, I called my cousin Rebecca, who lived in Tucson and occasionally saw my parents at family gatherings. Rebecca and I had always been close, and I trusted her to give me honest feedback about family dynamics. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest," I said. "Have my parents said anything to you about my financial situation or Tyler's career expenses?" Rebecca's hesitation told me everything I needed to know before she spoke. "Lauren, your mom has mentioned a few times how successful you are and how you've been able to help with family expenses," Rebecca said carefully. "She talks about you like you're the family success story." "What specifically has she said?" "That you're doing really well in your marketing job, that you bought your house outright, that you have plenty of savings to help with family emergencies," Rebecca replied. "She makes it sound like helping Tyler is easy for you because you're so financially secure." Every piece of information Mom had shared with Rebecca was either completely false or seriously misleading. I hadn't bought my house outright. I had a mortgage. I didn't have plenty of savings. I'd depleted my emergency fund. And helping Tyler wasn't easy. It was creating genuine financial strain. "Rebecca, that's not accurate," I said. "I've been going into debt to help with family expenses. I'm carrying credit card balances for the first time in years." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Lauren, your parents don't know that?" she asked. "Because your mom talks about your generosity like it's not costing you anything." This conversation confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. My family had constructed a narrative about my financial situation that justified their expectations while ignoring the actual impact of my contributions. The next morning, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. I was going to document the true scope of my financial sacrifices and present my family with evidence that contradicted their assumptions about my resources and well-being. I spent 3 hours creating a detailed spreadsheet that showed my actual financial situation, income, fixed expenses, debt payments, and the cumulative impact of family-related costs over the previous 8 months. The numbers were sobering even for me. I'd contributed $8,397 to family expenses while accumulating $7,200 in additional credit card debt. My monthly discretionary income, which my parents had calculated at $800, was actually negative $340 when debt payments were included. But more than the numbers, I documented the specific ways my financial contributions had affected my daily life: canceled subscriptions, delayed medical appointments, deferred car maintenance, eliminated entertainment expenses, and the constant stress of living paycheck to paycheck. I also researched the actual costs of Tyler's lifestyle choices in Denver. His apartment rent exceeded the median housing costs in his area by 35%. His professional wardrobe expenses were significantly higher than industry standards for new consultants. His networking and professional development costs were optional, investments rather than job requirements. Armed with this documentation, I called a family meeting of my own. "I need to talk with all of you about the real impact of our family financial arrangements," I said during a conference call that included Mom, Dad, and Tyler. "I've prepared some information that I think will help everyone understand the actual situation." I shared my spreadsheet via email and walked them through each section, explaining how their calculations about my discretionary income had missed the reality of my financial obligations. The response was not what I had hoped for. "Lauren, this is very detailed, but it seems like you're making this more complicated than it needs to be," Dad said after reviewing the spreadsheet. The bottom line is that Tyler has time-sensitive opportunities that could benefit his entire career. Mom was more direct in her dismissal of my documentation. "Honey, everyone has expenses and debt," she said. "The difference is that some people focus on problems while others focus on opportunities." Tyler's response revealed how completely he'd accepted his family's framing of my financial role. "Lauren, I appreciate you breaking down your expenses, but I think you're missing the bigger picture," he said. "My career success will eventually benefit all of us. Sometimes you have to think long-term instead of focusing on short-term cash flow issues." Their collective response made it clear that no amount of documentation or evidence would change their fundamental belief that my financial well-being should be subordinated to Tyler's career advancement. That's when I realized I needed outside perspective and support to navigate what had become an untenable family dynamic. I started with my best friend Jessica, who worked as a financial advisor and had experience helping clients deal with family money conflicts. "Lauren, this is financial abuse," Jessica said after reviewing my documentation. "Your family is systematically manipulating you into depleting your resources while dismissing your legitimate financial concerns." Jessica's use of the term financial abuse initially shocked me, but as she explained the dynamics she'd observed in other client situations, I began to recognize patterns I'd been too close to see clearly. "They're using emotional manipulation, guilt, and social pressure to override your financial boundaries," Jessica continued. "And they're reframing your sacrifices as evidence of your capacity to sacrifice more." Jessica recommended that I consult with a therapist who specialized in family financial conflicts, and she offered to help me develop a plan for establishing and maintaining healthy financial boundaries. My next ally came from an unexpected source. Tyler's college friend Marcus, who lived in Denver and had been hearing Tyler's version of our family financial arrangements, reached out to me directly. "Lauren, I hope this isn't overstepping, but I'm concerned about some things Tyler has mentioned regarding family financial support," Marcus said during a phone call that he'd requested specifically to discuss this topic. Marcus explained that Tyler had been describing his family financial situation to friends and colleagues in ways that didn't seem to match what Marcus understood about typical family support dynamics. "Tyler talks about family financial support like it's unlimited and automatic," Marcus said. "He mentions expensive purchases and professional investments like the money is just available without consequences for anyone." Marcus had also noticed that Tyler's lifestyle in Denver seemed inconsistent with someone who was still getting established and needed family financial assistance. "He's living in a luxury apartment, eating at expensive restaurants, and talking about weekend trips to Aspen," Marcus continued. "It doesn't add up with someone who supposedly needs help with basic career expenses." This conversation confirmed that Tyler had been misrepresenting both his financial needs and his family's financial dynamics to justify continued support while maintaining an expensive lifestyle. But my most important support came from an organization I discovered through online research, the National Family Financial Recovery Network, which provided resources and counseling for people dealing with family financial manipulation and abuse. Their intake coordinator, Patricia Williams, listened to my story with professional sympathy and immediately confirmed that my situation fit established patterns of family financial exploitation. "Lauren, what you're describing is a classic case of financial parentification," Patricia explained. "Your family has assigned you the role of financial caretaker while treating other family members as dependents who deserve support without reciprocal obligations." Patricia helped me understand that healthy family financial relationships required mutual respect for boundaries, acknowledgement of sacrifices, and reciprocal concern for everyone's well-being. "Your family has created a dynamic where your financial stability is considered less important than other family members' wants and preferences," she continued. "That's not normal family support. That's exploitation." Through the network, I connected with other people who had experienced similar family financial dynamics, and their stories helped me recognize that my situation was neither unique nor inevitable. More importantly, I learned strategies for establishing and maintaining financial boundaries, even when family members used emotional manipulation, guilt, and social pressure to override my decisions. Armed with professional support, documentation of the actual financial impact, and clear understanding of healthy family dynamics, I prepared for a conversation that would fundamentally change my relationship with my family. I was done being treated as a financial resource rather than a family member whose well-being mattered. The final confrontation happened during Thanksgiving week, when my family assumed I would contribute to Tyler's latest financial need, a $30,200 executive coaching program that his company had recommended for high-potential employees. Tyler called me directly this time, bypassing Mom and Dad's usual coordination of family financial requests. "Lauren, I have incredible news," he said, his excitement palpable through the phone. "My supervisor nominated me for this exclusive leadership development program. It's exactly the kind of opportunity that fast-tracks people to senior management." I listened politely as Tyler described the program benefits, networking opportunities, and career advancement potential. But when he mentioned the cost and suggested family investment, I was ready. "Tyler, I'm not contributing to any more of your career expenses," I said calmly. The silence on the other end lasted long enough to feel uncomfortable. "Lauren, this isn't just another expense," Tyler said finally, his tone shifting from excitement to frustration. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The program has a waiting list." "I understand it's important to you," I replied. "But you're making $87,000 a year. You can afford your own professional development." Tyler's response revealed how deeply he'd internalized the family narrative about my financial role. "You're being selfish," he said, his voice rising. "Family is supposed to support each other during crucial moments." "I have supported this family," I said firmly. "I've supported it to the point of damaging my own financial stability. That ends now." Tyler immediately called Mom, who called me 20 minutes later with barely controlled anger. "Lauren, Tyler is devastated," Mom said. "He can't understand why you're being so unsupportive during the most important phase of his career." "Mom, I need you to listen carefully," I said, using the calm tone Patricia had coached me to maintain during difficult family conversations. "I will no longer be contributing money to Tyler's expenses. I will no longer be treated as the family's financial solution to every problem, and I will no longer accept guilt and manipulation when I enforce reasonable boundaries." Mom's shock was audible. "Lauren, you can't mean that," she said. "Family doesn't work that way." "You're right," I replied. "Family doesn't work that way. Family members don't exploit each other financially. Family members don't dismiss each other's struggles while demanding unlimited support." The conversation that followed was the most difficult I'd ever had with my parents. Mom accused me of abandoning family values. Dad called me selfish and ungrateful. Tyler sent angry text messages about how my attitude was hurting the family. During his crucial career phase, but I held firm. "I've contributed over $8,000 to family expenses this year, while you've convinced yourselves that I'm financially comfortable," I said during a three-way call with both parents. "I've documented every expense, every sacrifice, every way this has affected my life. If you want to continue this conversation, you need to acknowledge reality." Dad's response was telling. "Lauren, we never asked you to keep track like we owe you something," he said. "Family help isn't supposed to be transactional." "You're right," I said. "It's not supposed to be transactional, but it's also not supposed to be one-directional. Tyler has received thousands of dollars in family support while contributing nothing to family expenses or emergencies." The breaking point came when Mom made one final attempt at emotional manipulation. "Your brother works hard and deserves support during this crucial time," she said. "If you can't see that, maybe you need to examine what kind of person you've become." "I've become someone who refuses to be financially abused by her own family," I replied. "If that disappoints you, I can live with your disappointment." I hung, up and immediately blocked Tyler's number to stop the stream of accusatory messages he'd been sending. The aftermath was swift and predictable. My parents stopped calling. Tyler's social media posts about family support and gratitude conspicuously excluded any mention of me. Extended family members began asking questions about why I wasn't participating in holiday planning. But something unexpected happened in the weeks following my financial boundary enforcement. Jessica, my friend who had identified the family financial abuse patterns, introduced me to her brother Kevin, who had gone through a similar experience with his family's treatment of his income and resources. "The hardest part isn't the money," Kevin told me during our first coffee meeting. "It's accepting that your family values your resources more than your well-being." Through Kevin, I connected with a support group for adults dealing with family financial exploitation. Hearing other people's stories helped me understand that my experience was part of a recognized pattern of family dysfunction. More importantly, I learned that enforcing financial boundaries often revealed the true nature of family relationships. 6 weeks after I stopped funding Tyler's career development, I received a call from Marcus, Tyler's friend in Denver. "Lauren, I thought you should know that Tyler's been telling people his family cut off financial support because they're jealous of his success," Marcus said. "He's completely rewritten the story to make himself the victim." Tyler's narrative revision confirmed everything I'd learned about family financial abuse. Exploiters typically respond to boundary enforcement by reframing themselves as victims of the people they've been exploiting. But I also learned something more hopeful. 3 months after establishing financial boundaries, I received an unexpected phone call from my cousin Rebecca. "Lauren, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I realize I need to apologize," Rebecca said. "I should have questioned what your parents were telling me about your financial situation instead of just accepting their version." Rebecca had started noticing inconsistencies in Mom's stories about my prosperity and Tyler's needs. More importantly, she'd begun questioning the family dynamic that had normalized my financial exploitation. The resolution wasn't reconciliation. It was clarity. My family had revealed their priorities through their response to my boundary enforcement. Tyler's career advancement was more important to them than my financial well-being. Their comfort with the existing dynamic was more important than addressing the unfairness I'd documented. But I had also discovered something valuable. I was capable of prioritizing my own well-being even when it disappointed people I loved. I could enforce boundaries even when it meant losing relationships that had required my financial self-sacrifice to maintain. The person I became through this process was stronger, clearer about my values, and no longer willing to accept exploitation in the name of family loyalty. 2 years after I stopped funding Tyler's endless career aspirations, I found myself sitting across from Dr. Elena Rodriguez in her comfortable therapy office, no longer as a patient seeking help with family trauma, but as a colleague discussing our joint research project on financial abuse within family systems. "Lauren, your case study has become one of our most powerful examples of how financial exploitation can masquerade as family loyalty," Dr. Rodriguez said as we reviewed data from our latest survey of family financial abuse survivors. "Your documentation and recovery process has helped us develop intervention strategies that are already helping hundreds of people." The research project had grown out of my own healing journey, but had evolved into something much larger. We were documenting patterns of family financial exploitation that affected an estimated 2.3 million Americans annually, with the majority being women in their 20s and 30s who had been designated as family success stories and expected to share their resources indefinitely. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Mitchell, a woman I'd been mentoring through her own family financial crisis. "Lauren, I did it. I told my brother I won't be paying his rent anymore. He's furious, but I feel free for the first time in 3 years." These messages had become routine over the past 18 months as word spread through support networks about my work helping people establish financial boundaries with exploitative family members. What had started as my personal recovery had transformed into a calling I never expected but couldn't ignore. The National Family Financial Recovery Network had invited me to join their board of directors, where I helped develop educational materials and policy recommendations for addressing family financial abuse. Our work had caught the attention of financial advisors, therapists, and legal advocates who were seeing increasing numbers of clients trapped in similar dynamics. But the most meaningful part of my recovery wasn't the professional recognition or advocacy opportunities. It was the profound personal transformation that had reshaped every aspect of my life. My financial recovery had taken nearly 2 years, but the process had taught me skills I'd never developed during my previous attempts at building wealth. I'd learned to budget based on my actual priorities rather than anticipated family emergencies. I'd built an emergency fund that was protected from family financial requests. I'd developed investment strategies that focused on my long-term security rather than maintaining availability for other people's immediate needs. The numbers were striking. In the 2 years since establishing financial boundaries, I'd saved $23,000, eliminated all credit card debt, and increased my retirement contributions to 15% of my salary. The financial stability I'd thought was impossible while supporting family members had materialized quickly once I stopped depleting my resources for other people's choices. But the psychological transformation was even more significant than the financial recovery. I'd learned to recognize manipulation tactics that I'd previously interpreted as expressions of family love. The guilt-inducing language about family loyalty, the emotional appeals about crucial opportunities, the suggestions that my financial limitations were temporary inconveniences, all of these had been revealed as sophisticated methods for overriding my rational decision-making processes. More importantly, I developed the emotional strength to maintain boundaries even when family members used increasingly desperate tactics to restore the previous dynamic. Tyler had eventually attempted reconciliation, but on terms that revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of what had damaged our relationship. 6 months after our final confrontation, he'd called to inform me that he was ready to forgive my lack of support during his career transition, and that we could move past the conflict if I acknowledged that family was more important than money. His offer of forgiveness for my refusal to fund his lifestyle had clarified that Tyler still viewed our relationship as contingent on my financial availability rather than mutual respect and reciprocity. "Tyler, I don't need your forgiveness for protecting my financial well-being," I replied calmly. "But I would be open to rebuilding our relationship if you're willing to acknowledge that what you characterized as family support was actually financial exploitation." Tyler had hung up without responding, and we hadn't spoken since. Mom and Dad's attempts at reconciliation had followed similar patterns. They'd occasionally call to update me on family news, but their conversations inevitably included subtle attempts to restore my role as family financial problem solver. "Your cousin Janet's having trouble with medical bills," Mom mentioned during one call. "I told her how generous you were with our family medical expenses. She might reach out for advice." The suggestion that I provide advice to Janet was clearly code for financial assistance, and Mom's reference to my previous generosity was an attempt to reactivate the family narrative that had justified my exploitation. "Mom, I'd be happy to give Janet information about medical bill negotiation and payment plan options," I replied. "But I won't be providing financial assistance to extended family members." These conversations had taught me that my family's attempts at reconciliation weren't actually about rebuilding our relationships. They were about restoring their access to my resources while avoiding accountability for the exploitation that had damaged our connections. But I'd also discovered that not all family relationships were irreparable. My cousin Rebecca had become one of my closest confidants and strongest supporters. She'd taken the initiative to understand the dynamics that had harmed our family, and she'd actively worked to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial utility. "Lauren, I need to apologize for how long it took me to recognize what your parents were doing to you," Rebecca had said during one of our regular coffee meetings. "I was so impressed by their stories about your success and generosity that I never questioned whether the situation was fair to you. Rebecca's acknowledgement had meant more to me than any amount of money I'd ever contributed to family expenses, because it represented someone choosing truth and fairness over comfortable family narratives. She'd also become an advocate within our extended family, gently correcting misconceptions about my financial situation and challenging relatives who made assumptions about my availability for family financial assistance. The support group I'd joined had evolved into a thriving community of survivors who met monthly to share experiences and strategies. We'd developed a curriculum for recognizing family financial abuse, establishing boundaries, and recovering from the psychological and economic damage caused by exploitation. Our group had attracted attention from researchers, policymakers, and financial professionals who were beginning to recognize family financial abuse as a distinct category of economic exploitation requiring specialized intervention strategies. Dr. Martinez, a financial therapist who worked with our group, had asked me to co-author a book about family financial boundaries aimed at helping people recognize and escape exploitative dynamics before they caused irreparable damage. Your story illustrates something crucial that most people don't understand, Dr. Martinez explained during our first book planning meeting. Family financial abuse often targets the most responsible and successful family members, precisely because their competence makes them attractive targets for exploitation. The book project had forced me to examine my experience from multiple perspectives, and the research process had revealed patterns I hadn't fully understood while living through the exploitation. I'd learned that financial abusers within families typically followed predictable escalation patterns. They started with reasonable requests during genuine emergencies, then gradually expanded their expectations while using emotional manipulation to override the target's financial boundaries. They also systematically misrepresented the target's financial situation to create social pressure for continued giving, while minimizing their own responsibility for financial planning and self-sufficiency. Most importantly, they responded to boundary enforcement with accusations of selfishness, disloyalty, and abandonment, using the target's love for family as a weapon against their own financial well-being. Understanding these patterns had helped me recognize that my family's treatment of me wasn't a unique dysfunction caused by personality conflicts or communication problems. It was a systematic form of economic exploitation that followed documented patterns observed in thousands of similar cases. This recognition had been both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it confirmed that my family had knowingly prioritized their financial convenience over my well-being. Liberating because it meant I could stop trying to fix a dynamic that was designed to exploit me regardless of how much I contributed or sacrificed. My work with other survivors had also revealed the profound healing that was possible once people escaped family financial exploitation and began building lives based on their actual values and priorities, rather than others' expectations and demands. Maria, a woman in our support group, had discovered her passion for art after stopping the flow of money to her gambling-addicted brother. Without the constant financial drain, she'd been able to take painting classes and eventually start selling her work. James had returned to graduate school after establishing boundaries with parents who had been using his income to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford on their own retirement income. His education had led to career opportunities that wouldn't have been possible while he was subsidizing his parents' financial irresponsibility. These success stories had reinforced my understanding that family financial exploitation didn't just damage bank accounts. It prevented targets from pursuing their own dreams and developing their own potential. My own life had expanded in ways I'd never anticipated once I stopped organizing it around other people's financial needs. I'd started traveling internationally, something I'd always wanted to do but had never felt financially secure enough to attempt while maintaining availability for family emergencies. I'd also begun dating seriously for the first time in years, and had met David, a financial planner who understood both the practical and emotional complexities of family money dynamics. Our relationship was built on mutual respect for each other's boundaries and goals, rather than one person's availability to solve the other's problems. The contrast between healthy relationships based on reciprocity and exploitative relationships based on one-sided giving had become starkly apparent as I'd built a social circle of people who valued my well-being as much as my resources. But perhaps the most important aspect of my recovery was the work I'd begun doing with young adults who were just starting to experience family financial pressure. Early intervention could prevent years of exploitation and the accompanying psychological damage that made boundary enforcement so difficult. The key is recognizing that family love doesn't require financial self-sacrifice, I would tell participants in our workshops. Healthy families want you to build security and pursue your dreams, not drain your resources to fund other people's choices. These conversations often revealed that many people had never considered the possibility that family financial requests could be inappropriate or exploitative, even when those requests were causing genuine hardship. The education component of our work had become crucial because family financial abuse was often invisible to targets who had been taught that unlimited availability for family financial support was a virtue rather than a form of exploitation. Looking back on the 2 years since Mom had told me that Tyler deserved a bigger gift, I realized that her statement had been accidentally prophetic. Tyler had deserved something bigger. The opportunity to develop genuine financial responsibility and self-reliance instead of depending on family subsidies for his lifestyle choices. And I had deserved something bigger too. The chance to build financial security, pursue personal goals, and develop relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided giving. The $4,300 I'd spent on Mom's surgery had been the right decision during a genuine medical emergency. But I'd learned that making the right decision once didn't create permanent obligations for future financial sacrifice, especially when those sacrifices were funding lifestyle choices rather than addressing genuine needs. The most important lesson I'd learned was that a true family, whether biological or chosen, wanted everyone to thrive rather than designating some members as resources for others' benefit. This understanding had transformed not just my relationship with money, but my understanding of what healthy love and support actually looked like in practice. I was finally living according to my own values and priorities, surrounded by people who celebrated my success rather than viewing it as an opportunity for their own benefit. That life had been worth every difficult conversation, every moment of guilt, and every relationship that couldn't survive the introduction of fairness and reciprocity. I was free, secure, and helping others find their own path to freedom. And I had never been happier. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.